Thank you so much, Joseph. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Yoni Argaman, who is the VP of Marketing and Business Strategy at Interactive. He's actually an ex-Yahoo, so we are very happy to have him here back at home. He lived in the States for a couple of years and just recently moved back. So with that.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, that's good. So I'm not an Ole Chadash like Joseph is. I'm pretty much a Toshav Chozer. I spent about 6 years in the US and really moved here, I would say 2.5 months ago. So I'm new, not new, but relatively new in Israel, trying to adjust to Israel again, which is not easy. But like Joseph said, Israel is home. During my time in the US, I spent some time in Amazon and then 3.5 years in Yahoo. I was there for almost 6 years. I did product and product marketing roles. I do have, I'm going to try to have my presentation on. That will help. I do. You have it? Yep. Thank you. I do, however, have a dark past as a corporate lawyer, and this is why I feel the urge to warn you guys that some of the things that I'm going to say today are really forward-looking statements. So bear with me. I need a clicker or something. Is this a clicker? Oh, okay, great. So we're going to take a glimpse into the future. We're going to try and see where mobile ad tech, the mobile ad tech environment, is going to look like 2-3 years from now. And we're going to talk about an app-centric environment, about full-stack cross-screen platforms, about native and video ads, talk a little bit about data, talk a little bit about e-commerce and deep linking, and talk a little bit about pricing models. And feel free to stop me at any point and ask any question you may have. So, app-centric environment. We feel that in 2 to 3 years, most of your engagement with digital devices will be in an app-centric environment. Right now, about 55% of all internet usage in the US is happening on mobile devices. This number is actually from almost a year ago, early 2014, and we feel that this number is actually higher now. But when you break it down and you look where users actually spend their time on mobile, you see that they spend about 86% of their time within an in-app environment, and then 14% of their time in mobile web. And this number is actually, when you look at other places like ComScore, this is a Flurry number, and because we're at Yahoo and Flurry was acquired by Yahoo, recently I brought the Flurry number, but if you look at the ComScore number, it's actually 88%. But what's interesting is where we were about a year ago. About a year ago, that figure was 67%. That 86% figure was 67%. And actually, if you look at ComScore's number, it's actually lower than that. So you do see a trend here. Yeah. Yeah. So we're talking about the time. So let's say it's a good question. When you're on Facebook and you click on a link to an article and you get a mobile web, you see it inside the Facebook app environment. Exactly, because we're talking about the time spent. Sorry?
Out of all the in-apps, what percentage is with Facebook?
How much users spend their time in? I don't think 90%, but it's pretty. It's pretty high when you think about the whole app environment. It's pretty high. They're pretty dominant. I think it's I think it's actually less than that. I think it's closer to around 20 to 30%. But even 20, 30% is pretty impressive. But when you look at the big publishers, what we call in the industry the tipping point or mobile majority actually happened. And when you look at the classic publisher, the big classic publishers like Yahoo, like the New York Times, like AOL, you see that tipping point in which the mobile inventory is actually higher than desktop inventory happened either this year or last year. But the thing is, and we saw this with Yahoo, is that most of it is coming from mobile web, and it's very, very hard for those big publishers to monetize it. They don't know how to monetize it. So I would say that really mobile monetization is broken there, and there's an opportunity there. But all these big publishers, and I gave you a few examples here, are trying to reinvent themselves, are trying to reimagine the user experience within an in-app environment. So what they do is what Fred Wilson calls app constellations. One word about Fred Wilson. How many people here heard the word native? It was mentioned here a few minutes ago. So Fred Wilson is a partner at Union Square Ventures in New York, one of the top VCs in the US, and he coined the term native. He also coined the term app constellations, and these are app constellations. Facebook is a good example. When you look at Facebook, you can see that they have different applications for different functions, for different uses. So, they have the Facebook app, they have Messenger, they have Instagram, they have WhatsApp, and the thing is, what they're trying to do is really connect all those apps. Think about a star constellation. This is why they're called app constellations. Those constellation of apps will be able to talk with each other. Once you're logged in into one of them, you're logged in into all of them, and you'll be able to move in a very, very seamless way from one app to another without going back to the main screen. So this is something very, very interesting. We're seeing that Yahoo is doing it as well. Google is doing it as well. A lot of those publishers are trying to, again, reinvent the experience, and they're doing it through those app constellations. They're also thinking about the next stage is how to monetize in that environment. And therefore, they're reinventing how ads are looking these days. And Facebook and Twitter are a good example of that, and we'll get to that. Another big trend that we're seeing now, which is going to contribute to that move, to that shift to the in-app environment, app-centric environment, is the fact that we're moving from 3 to 5 screens. So when you talk with the ad agencies, they're always talking about the 3 screens. And they're talking about the desktop, they're talking about smartphones, and they're talking about tablets. There's a slow shift towards what we call the 5 screens. And the extra 2 screens are connected TV and wearable devices. And the Internet of Things, whatever that means. But the main, I see the immediate 2 extra additional screens, connected TV and wearable devices. If you look at numbers of how many American households have some sort of a connected TV, whether it's Roku or Apple TV or Xbox, you see that about, I think the number is between 40 to 50% of American homes have some sort of a connected TV. And those in extra devices or extra screens, whether it's connected TV or wearable devices, they operate, again, in an app-centric environment. And ads will get there too. So we are talking, when we're talking about ads, we are talking about an app-centric environment. Let's talk a little bit about full-stack cross-screen platforms. This is a little technical. I'll give you a brief overview of how ads are bought today. Please stop me, ask me some questions. If it's too complicated, I'll try to really break it down for you guys. So when you think about how ads are bought today, you have 2 main ways. You have the direct sale channel, in which the 3 martini lunches, when you have those great salespeople sit down with the, we know that so well, sit down with the advertisers, the agencies, they have a nice meal, they have 3 martini glasses for lunch, and they sell, in a very direct way, huge bulks of inventory, of impressions, for very, very high CPMs. So that's one way of selling ads. That's the original way of selling ads. However, there's another way of selling ads, and That is the non-direct way, the non-guaranteed way. And you have a few channels in that way. These are automated ways. So every inventory that a big publisher that does not have a sales force wants to sell, or does have a sales force, but they cannot sell those impressions, they basically put in that bucket, in that channel. A lot of small publishers, they don't have a sales force. They're not able to maintain a sales force. So they put all their inventory in that bucket, the non-direct sell. And when we're talking about a non-direct sell, you have ad networks, you have ad exchanges. In recent years, you have DSPs, demand-side platforms, and SSPs, supply-side platforms. And all these big platforms are all about efficiency and are all about optimization, optimizing the way ads are bought and sold. So when you think about the early days of the internet, most ads were sold in a direct way. And then ad network appeared. And those ad networks were really arbitrage businesses. They bought for a very, very small amount of money for cheap and sold for high prices. And they basically were gaining or putting a premium on that price, making money this way. Then ad exchanges appeared. And ad exchanges were basically exchanges. And you would pay a fixed cost per transaction. And you had on one hand, you had a lot of advertisers. On the one hand, you have a lot of publishers. And they were buying and selling in a very automated marketplace. Then display-side platforms, supply-side platforms, which are platforms that are more geared to serve the needs of one of those sides, appeared. And what we're seeing today is actually companies that started as an SSPs or a DSPs or even exchanges building a full stack. And we start seeing it with the big companies, with Google, with Yahoo, with AOL. Well, we're now seeing it with more and more companies, and it's happening on mobile as well. Cross-screen, like I said, we're going to operate in a 5-screen environment. That means that an advertiser wants to run a campaign across all these screens. Those campaigns are different. The goals are different. They look differently. They have different budgets, different goals. So advertisers want to have those cross-screen platforms in which they can control. They can plan, they can onboard, they can measure, and get all the reporting and insights from one platform. But what I want to emphasize today are exchanges. Exchanges and basically the automated, the programmatic way, as we call it, to sell advertising, is becoming more and more interesting, more and more complex. Because the early days of exchanges, we only had open exchanges. Now we also have private marketplaces, and I'll say a word about that. Another thing that is erupting right now, and you see it on desktop, you see it on mobile as well, are programmatic direct. It's basically taking that direct sale channel and automating it. And when I talk about those comprehensive platforms, what is going to happen is that the programmatic direct, which is a very, very new platform, is going to merge into the exchanges. So you'll have one platform that will have open exchanges, will have private exchanges or private marketplaces, and programmatic direct. And they're going to work with each other, solving that very, very big pain point of channel conflict. If you're a publisher, you sell some of your inventory in a direct sell way, and some of the inventory in a programmatic, non-direct way. There's not a lot of efficiency there. Sometimes you have a lot of channel conflicts. Those systems on desktop and later on mobile, they are coming to mobile as well, are going to solve that. So let's take a deeper look into programmatic. Programmatic grew by 300% in 2014. And the reason for that is the DNA of how ads were bought and sold on the desktop is the background is very, very different than how it was bought and sold on mobile. And the reason for it is that when mobile inventory came around, not too long ago, that inventory was bundled into packages, desktop packages that were sold by the sales teams and of the different publishers. And so mobile, when it just started to come in, to be added to the stack, was viewed as remnant inventory, was viewed as bonus inventory. This is why publishers felt very, very comfortable throwing that inventory into those exchanges, in those environments. This is why a larger percentage of mobile inventory is sold via programmatic than desktop inventory. When you think about publishers, publishers are very concerned about the CPM rates that they're getting. So anything that they can sell, especially the big publishers, anything that they can sell directly and get those high CPMs, they'll do that. And what we're going to see now with the private marketplaces is one way to solve that concern. Whenever a publisher throws its inventory into an exchange, they're afraid. They're afraid that they're not going to get the CPM that they can get selling direct. They're afraid that they won't have control. They have a lot of concerns. A private marketplace is, I would say, a semi-solution to that problem. Because in a private marketplace, we give the publishers that premiumness feeling within an exchange environment. So bringing all the efficiencies of programmatic, but still maintaining that premium environment is something that private marketplaces are trying to do. And they're doing it by giving whitelisting and blacklisting capabilities to publishers. They're able to choose which advertisers they want to sell ads to, giving them dynamic price floors, making sure that they get the CPM rates that they want in very, very smart and efficient ways. Use formats, ad units, like video, like native that we're going to talk about, that generate those high CPMs, and also working with data. And we're going to talk about all these things. We're going to break it down. But basically, the idea is to let the publisher use their data to get a better price on the inventory that they have. So what you see in the industry now is about 90% of exchanges are open exchanges, where advertisers buy via RTB, real-time bidding, on an impression-by-impression basis. So what happens in RTB is that on every single impression, there's an auction that happens real-time in the back end. And a few advertisers, a few demand-side partners or players bid on an auction. And that auction happens in milliseconds in the background for every single impression. So open exchanges right now, 90% of exchanges are open exchanges right now, only 10% are private marketplaces. This is going to change in a couple of years. And in a couple of years, 30%, these are e-marketers' figures, about 30% of the exchanges would be private marketplaces. Sorry? So one of the main things that is driving that is video, and we're going to talk about that. The interesting thing about video, and I'm going to mention that, is that video is the only place in which you have more demand than supply. And this is really interesting to see, because when you look at the entire environment, the growth of supply is much higher than the growth of demand. So what happens is that the price plummet. Video is different. So with video, publishers don't have any incentive to throw video on exchanges, so they lose a lot of those efficiencies, and we're talking about premium video. So what happens is that more and more private marketplaces, and we're going to see that, more and more marketplaces are built for video. And premium video is a video that is professionally produced. There are 3 tiers. The lowest tier is what we call UGC, user-generated content. The upper tier is what you see on Netflix and Hulu. And there are actually more tiers, but premium video, UGC is something that is not really coveted by advertisers. Sorry, one more thing here. So we talked about programmatic direct today. Only about 8% of inventory that is sold programmatically is sold in a programmatic direct way, and 92% is sold in exchanges. But we're seeing that in 2, maybe 3 years, this is going to be very, very different. So this is a very, very interesting trend to look into, both on desktop and on mobile. Let's say a few words about native and video. We said that publishers are reinventing themselves, the whole user experience on a mobile device in an app-centric environment. Yep. Gil. Yep. Yeah, definitely. So basically, the exchanges operate, one of the main differences is that the exchanges operate on an impression-by-impression basis, RTB, real-time bidding. And so that auction exists, and it exists on impression-by-impression basis. What you're going to see in programmatic direct is really the automation of the direct sale process. So no more IOs, which are being faxed, something that I actually saw up until 6 months ago happens. Faxes that you get with insertion orders, IOs. And you'll see the sale of large bulks of inventory through an automated platform. What is now being done on an IO will be done through an automated platform. But it's not RTB. It's not on impression-by-impression basis. It's not an auction. It's very, very, very customized. It's very, very, very personal. I could talk a lot about that, and we can definitely spend some time afterwards talking about that. But it's different. But the thing is, what is going to happen is that I think that only about 10 to 15% of all inventory is going to be sold in a direct sell, the old school direct sell way, very customized, very big sponsorships way. And most of what is sold today in that way will go to programmatic direct. And the great thing about that, today we have a lot of channel conflicts between those two sales channels. And that platform, an automated platform that will do both of these things, will bring a lot of efficiencies to that process. So we talked about those app constellations and how publishers reinvent themselves in an app-centric environment. They're also understanding what the right ad format is for mobile, and specifically for in-app. And those two formats, those two erupting formats are native and video. You see the figure here for video. In 2013, the value just disappeared, but basically it's $660 million in the US of mobile video advertising. 2018, $6 billion. And there are a few drivers for it. I mean, there are a lot of concerns by advertisers. They don't know how to really understand the value or quantify the value of mobile video. They don't know the right metrics for it. There's not a lot of standardization around that, around metrics, around players. And there's a lot of concerns about the whole video experience within that smaller devices. It's a small device, it's a small screen. There's a lot of right now, there's a lot of, reception is not good, the video is breaking. So a lot of things that needs to be solved. One of the main things, though, is the fact that video is, again, being sold mostly via direct way, direct sales channel, and being sold, again, in a bundle. With the big publisher, it's really bundled into that whole, big desktop sales. It's not a lot of efficiencies there, and that is going to change. You see that.
How come the prediction is 10 times higher in terms of mobile video ad spend, while there's so much, according to what you say, uncertainty about the effectiveness of this?
Because a lot of those uncertainties are going to be solved. You see more and more standardization around mobile video. You see more and more, and you see this number. It's actually a lot higher now. This is again from a year ago. Apologize for the numbers, but more and more advertisers, more and more agencies have mobile video budgets. Once, up until like a year ago, you saw mobile budgets and video budgets. And you didn't see mobile video budgets. Now you see mobile video budgets. And this number actually, the 6 billion, is actually going to be probably 50% of all online video buy. Online video in general, not just on mobile, is going to get bigger and bigger. There's a thing called share shift, which is basically the movement of TV dollars into online video. And it's happening more and more as we see it. Publishers, publishers try to do that for years without a lot of success, but it is happening for a lot of reasons. It is happening in the last few years. One of the main reasons for that is a lot of the metrics that they use on TV, like GRPs, TRPs, are also metrics that you can now get on online video. So a lot of those big publishers are partnering with the Nielsen's of the world, the ComScores of the world, to get those numbers and give it to advertisers, so advertisers can really have a good benchmark on how this is performing next to TV. I know it's old school because GRP really measures reach, and you're not really using all the capabilities that you have on the internet, online versus TV. But this is how that world works. It's old school. It's meeting that happens once a year with the old management of that industry. things, it takes time for those things to move, but they are moving. So that is the good news. Yeah, and it's finally taking hold. This is interesting because what you see here is that 30% is basically how video is bought programmatically today. So only 30% of videos are bought programmatically today, but look at the split between exchanges and private marketplaces. What I'm trying to say here, my story here, is the fact that private marketplaces are probably the right way to sell video programmatically. And it's happening on the desktop, it's happening on the mobile, and this is actually, that realization is actually one of the drivers that will increase the amount of money that flows into online video in general and in mobile in particular. Programmatic is basically buying online inventory in an automated way. And right now, as I see it at least, you have two types of programmatic. One type is exchanges, like I mentioned, and the other type is programmatic direct. And they're going to converge into one platform. So it's
We're talking about desktop and mobile. How does OTT fit in terms of advertising?
that's a whole new story. It's a whole other story. But let's take that offline because I have a lot of content to talk about. Well, we'll talk about it later. So the two levels of native. I brought a Yahoo example, and it's a shame that Lina just left the room because I really picked that example for her. This is a Yahoo executions. You probably know Yahoo magazines. Of course you do, say that you do. This is recorded. We all know Yahoo magazines, the new experience on Yahoo, on desktop and on tablets. And what you see here is an ad for Kno in Hebrew. In the US is actually Nor. The K is silent. But this is a native ad. This is a good example of a native ad. So you have two different levels of native. The first level is really where you get an ad to have the same look and feel of the environment it's in. So that's the first level of native. Now there's a deeper level, which Fred Wilson, when he coined the term native, thought about that, which the ad is not just very similar. The look and feel of the ad is very similar to the content that it surrounds, but also the context of the ad is very similar to the context of the content around that. So if you see, this is probably a good example, the best I could find, so bear with me. Nor is the look and feel of the ad, it's like a tile. It looks as, part of the content, but also the context of the ad is very similar to the context of the content. So this is Yahoo Food magazine for, I don't know if this is for an ad for soup, and it's in Yahoo Food magazine. So basically, instead of seeing an ad for a car here, you see an ad for food. So this is a good example of the second level. It has both the same look and feel. It looks like a tile, like the other content pieces here. But it also, in terms of context, it has roughly the same context. Food, soup, I think it's the same context. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But I feel it's the same context. So just a word here, companies like Taboola and Outbrain, their claim to fame is doing that second, deeper type of native ad. What they do is basically they provide recommendations for additional pieces of content that are very similar to the piece of content that you're watching, you're viewing. And one of those tiles, one of those recommendations is an ad, and that ad is very, very similar both in terms of look and feel and in terms of the context to the environment. Why do we know native works? See, 66% of Facebook's revenue and 85% of Twitter's revenue comes from mobile. And the main reason, the main driver for it are native ads in their apps. And I think I don't want to say discovered, because many players were doing it before, but they really are a good case study for why native ads work. This is an interesting number. On the left, you see, sorry about that. On the left, you see CTRs, click-through rates, for a native ad on a desktop. And on the right, you see the CTRs of a mobile native ad. And you see that, thinking because it's less intrusive, I would guess, because it feels more natural, maybe it'll change in the future. Users will get used to that, but right now, this is where it's happening. So this is the right format. CTRs, click-through rates. I'm just checking that you guys are still awake. I saw the Star Wars trailer the other day, so that's my screensaver. So yeah, that was actually I brought a Yahoo example, and you weren't here, so I'll show you afterwards. But that example that I showed is also an example on the desktop. That specifically that was on a tablet example, but it's the same on desktop. So Yahoo has a lot of magazines that we all like, and that new experience of those new magazines, the environment is really a tile-based environment, and in a lot of those tiles you see ads. Native ads. On the mobile, yeah. CTR is much higher for native ads on mobile than they are on native ads on desktop, yeah. On mobile and desktop? Yeah, that specific research, I think it was, I picked it from eMarketer. I don't remember the exact research. I can look it up. But that was, I definitely remember that. In terms of clicks, I think that is a great example. People are clicking more on the same ad, the same experience on mobile more than they do on desktops. I think that is a great example. I don't have more information. Intuitively, I think it's the case in general, but again, I can't back it up. Yeah. Is the value of the click the lifetime value? I have no information on that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about, you talk about progressive effects, but where do you see in terms of CPMs, in terms of mobile, always the lowest, desktop, are the problems?
They're actually higher now. And that tipping point, I think, was either late last year or early this year, 2014. And we saw a few SSPs. We saw the reports, and we saw that I think at least in 3 or 4 of them, that tipping point happened anywhere between Q4 last year and Q1 this year. And within mobile, CPM rates are higher in-app than a mobile web, significantly. I think the trend will only get better and better in terms of mobile, in favor of mobile. My personal view. I think as we get more and more data into mobile, and I'll say a few words about that, I think as we'll get more and more premium ad units into mobile, stuff that you have now online but you don't have on mobile devices, as you'll have more, I think more better platforms in mobile, and they'll do as a job as they do on desktop today. All these things together will only make mobile inventory, the CPMs on mobile inventory, higher than desktop. All these 3 things, I think, will make it even higher. So I said a few words about that. Why do we need data? So we talked about what's happening in ad tech in general. We talked about the rate of supply growing at a higher growth rate than the rate of demand. So in this environment, inventory becomes a commodity and prices go down. What you need to do is to somehow make your inventory premium, more unique, more special. So how to do it? One way to do it is with adding data to your inventory. So an impression, a naked impression, so to speak, it does not worth a lot to an advertiser. But an impression that has a few data elements attached to it, data parameters attached to it, they know who the user is, age, gender, geo, is worth a lot more. In fact, in mobile, where data is not as developed as on the desktop environment, we saw that by even adding one of either geo or device ID parameter, you can get it 2 to 6x in terms of CTRs, CPMs. This is really amazing. And imagine we're only using two parameters, two data parameters. What happens on desktop, you have a lot of data points. And the big publishers and a lot of other vendors and companies and a lot of stuff that we did in Yahoo is basically collect all those data points and take the users and put them in a certain segment, audience segment. And audience segments, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago, were very, very high level. Were very general, saying that that user lives in New York. That user is a male, 18 to 34 years old. That was the level of the audience segments. Nowadays, on the desktop side, it's much, much more granular. And we know really how to take data from so many different points and really create those very, very, very granular audience segments. Users that love sports and drive and Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi, it has to be in Israel or Japan. But my point is that the level of segments, of audience segments, is very, very, very granular. And when that happens, in that RTB environment, think about that. In an RTB environment, you have an auction. And you have different bidders. And those bidders need to know how much to bid on a certain impression. How do they know that? They need certain parameters to enable that they can read, and understand. And then they need to understand how much these parameters are worth to the advertisers that they're representing, right? So the more data that you have, the more parameters that you have, the better. And it's not just on the user, it's on the environment. On the desktop, it's above the fold, below the fold, time of day, etc. In context of the web page, it's not just about the user. So what we're seeing is that on desktop, it's very, 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 very developed. And what DSPs are getting are a lot of super, super granular audience segments at scale. You don't see that on mobile. On mobile, most of the things that you see today are only the use of geo and device ID. That's it. What I think will happen in the next 2 or 3 years is that this will get to mobile as well. The level of granularity, and it's going to be more challenging, obviously, because it's much, like Joseph said, it's much harder to collect this data and create that audience segments on mobile. When you think about this, the big players have a lot of advantages on that, because if you're Facebook, then your user just logs in on mobile. It's the same user from the desktop. You know everything about him. So you know a lot about him. The same goes for Twitter, for Google. This is why the logging is so strong in mobile. But what will happen is, and we're seeing more and more and more solutions to collect this data and create all these segments, all these granular audience segments. So this is definitely something that's going to push the CPMs up. Back to your question. Let's spend a little bit talking about the closed loop. Joseph talked a little bit about attribution. And attribution is basically an advertiser wants to know how much each touch point that his user was in attributed to the final action of that user. If that user saw a billboard, if that user saw an online ad, a search ad, how much of that attributed to that user's decision to make that action, that required action that the advertiser wanted to. That is the holy grail, together with the closed loop solutions. Closed loop solutions are solutions basically that are taking offline data, like CRM lists, and converging them to create all those very granular audience segments that we spoke about. So let's think about Target. Target is a huge retailer in the US. They have CRM lists. There are companies right now that can, Experian, IXI, Axiom, that can take those CRM lists and identify Yoni Argaman, who bought a lamp on Target and lives on this and that street in New York, as user 123. That cookie matching enables us, and there were a lot of executions that we did on Yahoo like these. Facebook is doing a lot. Google is doing it a lot. Basically taking that offline information and creating additional user segments, audience segments that they can then pass to an advertiser and get a higher price for that impression. So that is actually the holy grail, and the fact that mobile sends so many signals And we'll send more and more signals, like you're going to use your mobile device to buy things. And you're going to run it through POCs and stores. So all these data points, they're going to use them to create those segments, to create those higher CPMs. Few words, I'm close to the end. A few words about e-commerce and deep linking. So a lot of the things, what brands are doing right now in mobile, we saw that a lot of brands don't invest a lot of money in mobile. It is changing. What are brands doing is a lot of search, not a lot of display. If they do display, it's more towards the brand awareness side. It's less a performance type of an execution. But what I think will happen, and specifically in verticals like retail and travel, drop that, and travel, that what we'll see are more performance display campaigns. And we are going to see retargeting, like Joseph mentioned, and together with deep linking, those retargeting, the optimization of a landing page through deep linking, and when we have the guys in the back that are experts on that, we're going to see more and more of those executions on mobile. And finally, pricing models. So when you talk about pricing models, you have a spectrum, and that spectrum represents the amount of risk an advertiser takes. So if that spectrum, that side represents the least risk an advertiser takes, and that side represents the most risk an advertiser can take, where's CPM? Right. And everybody understands why, right? They just buy 1,000 impressions. They don't know how those impressions are going to perform. They just pay a certain price for those 1,000 impressions. On that side, you have CPA, cost per action, CPI, where we see in mobile cost per install, which is a type of CPA. CPC is somewhere around here. But what I'm saying here is that we're going to see more and more and more different pricing models. We're going to see a lot of companies more and more that are making a profit on those and optimizing those pricing models. And whenever you see and you hear the term eCPM, that E, effective CPM, is a translation of a different pricing model into CPM. So in that translation, in a sense, a lot of companies are making a lot of money, and this is only going to be, you're going to see more and more of that because we're going to have a lot more and more pricing models. See, I talked about CPI. CPCV is a video, very interesting video pricing model, cost per completed view. So the advertiser is only going to pay on a completed view if the user saw the entire ad. And this is especially strong on YouTube right now. What YouTube is doing is basically allowing users to skip an ad. And then they're going and telling to the advertisers, look, we allowed the users to skip the ad. We enabled them to skip the ad. They chose not to. They chose actually to opt in and be very, very engaged with your ad. This is why it makes a lot of sense that you'll pay us $10 for a CPCV. So YouTube can do that because they have a lot of scale. But my point is that you're going to see a lot more of those different pricing models, reacting to different ad formats, reacting to different devices and different environments, and it's going to be geared more and more to that direction. This is it. GRP is basically something that is taken from the TV world. It represents reach, gross rating point. And it represents reach. And what you're seeing in online video right now is that a lot of collaborations enabling publishers to really capture those metrics and present them to advertisers. And advertisers feel very, very comfortable with that because they're used to that metric from TV. So they have a benchmark. This is a completely different subject. It should, right now, you're right. But now you're thinking like a very young TV executive, not like the old ones. Basically, GRP does not include that view. But going back to your question before, now we have models like CPMV and cost per view. And the IAB, which is the body that basically built the standards in the advertising world, really came up with viewability metrics right now, CPV for display, CPMV, also for video. And the thing is, with those pricing models, you only pay, if you're an advertiser, you only pay for a viewable view, an impression that was viewed. And how you measure it is for display. Yep. And how you measure it is for display, the standard is 50% of the pixel that the user saw for 2 seconds. And for 1 second in display, 2 seconds in video. So the advertiser will only pay for those impressions that he will know that they were viewed. Yeah. CPCV, cost per completed view. I just threw a figure to the air.
YouTube is very coy about revealing that kind of number. It's very hard to get that.
I actually know the number. And I also know that around 80 to 85%, whenever you have a skip ad, users choose to, 80 to 85% of users choose to skip. So when you do the math and you're trying to optimize that eCPM that we spoke about, when you have those figures and you have that scale like YouTube has, you have a much stronger offering, a video offering to an advertiser. The number? Well, it varies. It varies anywhere between, I would say, $7 to 20, 22. It varies. For that view. Yeah. For the completed view. What? What unit? Sorry? If a user saw 100% of the ad. What? No. Cost per completed view. A metric that you can show the advertiser, and advertisers actually want to see more and more, is the quartile. If a user saw 25%, if a user saw 50%, 75%, but that is a metric that you send the advertiser want to see. A CPCV, they only pay for a completed view, which is a 100% view. For a completed view. If it's only one unique user, I don't think that they calculate that based on that, but that's a smarter way. Again, you're way advanced of way beyond your what is really happening. And this is one of the funny things about ad tech, because for us, a lot of things don't make sense in ad tech. But ad tech, and especially when you talk about the older mediums like TV, I don't even talk about billboards and magazines, but advertisers are super conservative, and a lot of the budgets are being held by agencies. And agencies who hold actually most of the budgets are very, very conservative. And this is why when you come up with new measurements and new metrics, it's very, very hard, because sometimes you need to educate them. They don't understand. They don't want to make the effort to understand. This is one of the challenges that you see in ad tech, with being innovative in ad tech. With the what, sorry? Well, I think it depends. So what we did at Yahoo was very interesting. We had products that were called Smart Ads, and we had about 9 products, and I worked very, very closely with Linat on those products. And so there's a difference between targeting and personalization. Targeting is where you have 1,000 people, 1,000 users, and you say, I, as an advertiser, I only want to target males who are 18 to 24 who live in New York. Out of those 1,000, you'll only serve the same ad to maybe 200, maybe. So that's targeting. And then you have personalization through what we call DCO, Dynamic Creative Optimization. Dynamic Creative Optimization is basically a way to tell a different story to different users. And what you do is basically you take the creative of the ad, you break it down to the different elements. The image of the product, the headline, the title of the product, the background, call to action button. You have a lot of different elements, components in the creative. You break them down. You have different varieties of of versions of each component. And then theoretically, you can create thousands of different permutations of the same ad and serve the right ad to the right user. So you can serve, in that example of the 1,000 users, you can serve 1,000 different ads to 1,000 different users theoretically, and you can get very, very granular based on the data that you have and the creative that you have. Yeah. Yeah, and you can also what you can do with DCO is A/B testing. And you can see, and not only base the ads, no, this is not trivial. In ad tech, nothing is trivial. But not only is you're using the user data to personalize the ad, but you're also doing A/B testing on the performance. And you keep optimizing the ads that you serve until you get it right, in a sense. So that is, right now, I think it's a commodity on the desktop, but I think it's actually coming more and more to mobile. And that would be interesting to look at as well. We have more time? Or?